now I have been working for an insurance company for 10 years um, as their fine arts uh, specialist, and I am it. I pitched the idea to the company after I'd been there about 2 or 3 months because the bread and butter of the company is churches.
Mm.
And as somebody who has been an appraiser for a number of years, when I would walk into the churches, I wouldn't just look at them from the insurance perspective, I'd be looking at them from the fine arts perspective, which a lot of my colleagues, none of the colleagues that work with me at the company have experience in. So when I would walk in, I would immediately be drawn to the art and the stained glass windows. And mm, a lot of people look at stained glass windows and think of them as just colored windows, when really they're works of art. They're absolutely works of art. Tiffany Studios is the most well-known one, and they still carry a very big cachet in the auction market. And so when you come across these windows, if they have Tiffany on them, they're worth doing not only doing a double take, but if you are someone who is over a particular church, they should be appraised
Mhm.
because the market, it wants Tiffany stained glass. And there have been articles recently where a Tiffany window sold for 12 million. Um, that was in someone's church. I've seen ones where they've sold for 250,000. And again, these are just windows to some people, but they are worth a lot. And I've even walked in some churches where we were doing an inspection, a risk inspection, and the building was worth less than the stained glass windows,
That's
especially
wild.
in those older communities where the church population has dwindled. The city has that area, the city may have been falling in disrepair, but the windows don't change. If
Hmm.
they don't have a hole through them or, they're not completely bowed out, they still have value. And you can remove those windows and bring them to auction. And there's someone out there, a university, a museum, or even a collector who will pay top dollar. And it's proven,
Absolutely.
right, to this day. So, yes, stained glass windows have significant value. And if your church has stained glass windows, they may not be Tiffany, but it's a good idea to find out who the studio was and to have them appraised to make sure that you are getting them insured for their proper value.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the event of damage or loss, and we've had a lot of instances with natural disasters and tragedies with churches being destroyed, then if you just have the building insured as a building and you aren't looking at it with that special perspective you have with your fine art background,
Yeah.
churches are very, very vulnerable to not really, being adequately insured.
Yeah. They become underinsured. And then when the loss occurs, we find that sometimes they haven't been reevaluated, the windows, for years. Because if you're not educated in fine art, you don't realize that fine art must be reevaluated every 3 to 5 years to reflect the fluctuations in the art market. And since stained glass, some of these studios, it is considered fine art, you must update the value of your windows on a regular basis. And conservatively 5 years, um, reasonably 3 years, every 3 years, for sure. And my recommendation would be if you find that you have one of these $1 million windows or one of these really, really specialty studios, then those should be put on a separate schedule. They call it the inland marine schedule. And basically, it's a rider on your commercial policy. And
Hmm.
what it does is, in many cases, a regular commercial policy will only cover fine arts up to a certain limit of liability. Now, stained glass windows can get away with it because they can be considered building property because people think they're attached, but they're removable. As we all
Hmm.
know, windows can be removed. And so if you have a stained glass window from a studio that is considered a high end or high value studio, I would recommend one, getting them appraised, And then two, if the value is significant, placing them on that rider so that you have specific coverage. There's no debating because it's based on that appraisal. And so if a loss occurs, you can immediately submit that claim, and the inland marine is your proof of value. And as long as it's updated every 3 to 5 years, you're in good shape. And it's just protection. It's broad protection, much
Yeah,
broader protection than just being covered on the commercial policy.
absolutely. In terms of in a business sense, I mean, do you find that this is something that, you know, churches or management of churches or need to be told? You know what I mean? Do they need to be like sat down and be like, you should really
Yeah.
think about this, or is it, or it comes up? Does it come up in like, I don't know. How does it come up? I guess how does some people
Yeah,
realize?
I think that the brokers, the account managers, or the sales reps for the individual insurance companies, when they come across a church, or if churches are part of their book of business, that should be on their list of questions.
Yeah.
When they come across stained glass windows, now not every stained glass window is going to be from a high-end studio. We know that, but it's great to ask that question. And if the church says we don't know or we're not sure, I would definitely uh, get an appraiser out there to verify or confirm that these are windows that may not be of significant cost. Um, but if they know some of the history on it, they know it's by Lafarge, or the windows are by Tiffany, or the windows are by even some of the studios that aren't as well known as Tiffany, but are still were major studios in their day, Holiday, Meyer, Lamb, they should be evaluated. And and most churches, they don't think about that. They think that the coverage is built in so that they're automatically going to be covered up to the limit of liability on the building. But what
Mhm.
sometimes happens is the building will be insured and they'll include the stained glass in it, but at a nominal amount because they're not taking into consideration that it's fine art.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're undervalued, they're underinsured.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody wins because the insurance company is not collecting the proper premium
Hmm.
and the insured is underinsured. So when the
Exactly.
loss occurs, it can be a problem. So I think there should be a checklist. I think that account reps, sales reps, brokers should ask that question when they walk into a building and see a church that has stained glass windows. Do you know the value? Have they ever been appraised? And then recommend them being appraised if they believe that they are of significant value.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned the inland marine policy, and I that's one of my favorite pieces of insurance lingo because people are always like, "What? Huh? Marine?
Uh-huh.
What?"
Uh-huh. Yeah.
A
Yeah. Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit to how that originated because it's I find it so fascinating in terms of, how insurance has evolved through the t over time.
I'm not as versed on it, I guess, as maybe somebody who works in inland marine schedules for a living, but I believe that it came about in the early days of boat travel from Europe and to America. And they would insure the items that were on the vessels to a certain extent. Um, they weren't quite on land, or before they got on land, they had to insure them. And over time, it became not just the items on the boats that were coming in into the uh, onto land, but then it became high-end items that were needing specialty coverage. And I'm not sure exactly when the transition came from insuring them en route and just getting on land to being specialty items. But I know today, the majority of the reason why we have inland marine schedules is to cover those specialty items. And those specialty items don't have to just be stained glass windows or fine art. They can be high-end audiovisual equipment that may be at a location. They can be um, they could even be pipe organs if you want to insure your pipe organ. It can be really any number of things, any number of items that you feel would be considered. I've seen sports equipment on the marine schedule. If a location has a ton of sports equipment and they want to have it specifically covered, definitely have seen audio visual equipment. I've seen musical instruments, pipe organs, stained glass, and of course, jewelry. Some insured locations, commercial locations, even our churches, they have uh, religious ceremonial pieces that are encrusted in jewels and precious metals. I've worked with some churches that have whole fine art collections. I mean, st art collections.
Hmm.
And so those items would be covered on the in the Marine schedule. But yeah, the history of it was while en route or on the boats, and it's kind of morphed into covering specialty high value, high end items. That aren't covered under your traditional policy because certain traditional policies have a limit of liability. And sometimes it'll be 5,000 per occurrence. So if you walk into your church and you know you've got more than $5,000 worth of fine art in your
Hmm.
church building, then those items should be on an inland marine schedule. Now, every schedule is different. Some schedules have a larger limit of liability. It could be 10,000 per occurrence or 25,000. But if you know, just a rough guesstimate, that you've got more than 5,000 or 10,000 or $25,000 worth of fine art, and again, that can be valuable religious objects, stained glass windows, paintings, um, even religious furnishings, even valuable papers. If you know you've got more than those limits of liability on it in your church or in your commercial facility, then you should look at having those on a separate rider so that they're covered. And a lot of those items, um, we insure we insure synagogues, and the Jewish synagogues will sometimes move their Torahs from one location to another for different events. Well, if it's just on a regular policy, it's not going to be covered while it's en route to that location.
Hmm.
If it's on an inland marine schedule, then it's covered anywhere in the world. So
Okay.
on the way to that location, there's an accident or it's damaged, or while it's at that location, it's damaged, something spilled on it. It's something happens and it's no longer in the same condition it was when it left the church. There's
Hmm.
coverage for that. But if
Hmm.
you don't have it on an inland marine schedule and something happens to it, you don't have full coverage.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that rider is very, very important if you have anything of value that you want protected and you want broader coverage for it, not just the basic coverage that you'll find on a commercial policy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's a great point because many of these art, artifacts, art and objects, they're in use. They are active in
Mhm.
the congregation. And so I love that point. And also something I think that's so cool about what you do is you work with, every belief system, every
Mhm.
denomination. And so it's this huge array of art and antique objects that potentially, would really be vulnerable. Like I imagine there's a lot of silver in in a lot of
Yes. And
these.
absolutely. And as you know, the price of gold and silver has skyrocketed over the past just over the past year.
Mm.
And so where I work, the churches, and we insure every denomination. So that's Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, Jewish. We insure all of them. And so those churches, depending upon how they sh show their worship, they use certain elements. It can be murals on the wall, like we see a lot in our Eastern Orthodox churches. It can be the serving utensils that are used in the Christian churches. And some of those items are gold and silver plated. Some are actual gold, some actual silver. And the value of those items goes up. I had one church that had a gold that I guess they invested in gold. They had gold bars and gold coins that they used as part of their investment portfolio, but they kept
Mm.
them at the church. And when I came across the inland marine schedule, it hadn't been updated since 2009.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
however we were insuring these items, we were insuring them, we were insuring gold at 2009 prices.
Hmm. Hmm.
we already know in 2025, there's a significant, probably at least a 30 to 40% increase in the value since 2009. So that's another thing. If you know you've got items that are specialty like gold and silver or even jewels, you want to definitely get those updated on a regular basis because uh, the price of art and gold and jewels it just steadily climbs.
Yeah.
There are sometimes there are dips, but by and large, fine art slowly and steadily increases in value, and such the same as gold, silver, jewels. Um, all those things are good to keep in mind if you have those in your. And yes, I've seen all of that uh, in the denominations that we insure and walking into some of the most beautiful, beautiful structures of every denomination. They all
Hmm.
have some art element within them. Not every single church, but every denomination has something that they use to celebrate, pay reverence to, or just to adorn their church in that is of high value and
Hmm.
should be addressed and looked at on a regular basis.
That's interesting. I'm wondering about, because I'm wondering for the church's sake and the community and the community that supports them. Do you think it would be awkward for like I'm assuming someone's maybe we're lucky enough to have somebody watching today who's gonna be like think, oh, I want to maybe I'll check with my priest. Does he have this? I wonder how that conversation will go if you have to go into the confession booth and ask about their inland marine policies, or I don't know.
No, I think that if you're a company, an insurance company that is prospecting them, so
Yeah.
maybe you're not insuring them, so you're ABC insurance company, but they're being insured by XYZ and it's their renewal time, I
Mm,
think that that would be the time when an insurance company could come in and look at this church and as a prospect and say, hey, as part of our coverage package, we pay close attention to the fine arts. And so, in your current policy, do you guys have a rider for your fine arts? Or is there a rider for your stained glass windows? Has your pipe organ been evaluated? Believe it or
mhm,
not, they're not overlooked, but they
mhm,
can be undervalued if you don't know, because the pipe organ, although it's built into the church and it is part of the building, it is of significant value.
mhm.
And to me, it's another piece of art because
Yeah,
they're built. And
yeah,
what people don't realize is that pipe organs, which you see on the outside, you see the pipes and then you see the organ in front. They don't realize that those pipes are mostly a facade. Those pipes don't even make the sound.
okay.
It's behind the pipe organ. And there's usually a little doorway somewhere where you guys or church members wouldn't even notice, but the organist knows and the maintenance man knows. There's a little small door behind those huge pipes that you see when you walk in, when you look at a pipe organ in a church. And I'm telling you, it can go back, I mean, 30 feet behind those pipe
Wow,
facades that you see.
yeah,
And it is a network of pipes that play different sounds, the flute sound, the violin sound, the bass sound. And and they're built by hand. Like
yeah,
that's not a kit. So somebody has to come in there and build those and that's why you'll see pipe organs in a church for years, over
yeah,
100 years, and they have to be maintained. So they're built, they have to be maintained, and all of that extends to value. And then to replace them. So if you look at the replacement value for a pipe organ, the replacement value is going to increase because the cost of the materials to create them goes up, just like everything else.
mhm,
The labor. So yeah, pipe organs are another one that has to be looked at. And so that account manager, that who's looking at this new church as a prospect, he should definitely ask about the pipe organ and how has it been reevaluated. The stained glass
mhm,
windows, if there's stained glass windows, is there any fine art? Are there any uh, serving items that you use that may be precious metal. And if they say, I think kind of, yeah, all of those I would say would be the door, open door for that new uh, sales rep to come in and offer that they can do an evaluation and provide a better service, if they're trying to, win that business. But yeah,
Mhm.
stained glass windows, the pipe organs, any serving materials that may be made of precious metal, and if they have any fine art that they know of.
Okay,
Yeah, those are great questions to ask.
cool.
Fantastic.
But
Yeah, and
I don't think you could just walk in off the street and say, "Hey, do you guys have really expensive?" Yeah, I think the lead in would be you're with a reputable company and you're trying to write the business.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, and the follow up on Patrick's question, if someone is, in leadership in a church, and it might be a good idea for them to look at their policy and see, are we well protected? Are we, vulnerable in certain areas? And so that would be, hopefully they're going to be watching this someday.
Right.
Then they can, really take the steps to make sure that all of these precious, both spiritually and precious, literally items are well
Mhm.
protected.
Yeah, definitely. And again, sometimes they are looked at, but they were looked at in 2007, in
Mhm.
2012.
Yeah.
And it's literally almost 2026. So
Mhm.
these items, just like we look at the building and look at the roof, most insurance companies, they're always looking at the roof because the roof has a large exposure. It's exposed to the elements, heat, water, wind. The same way they have to look at the roof on a regular basis, whatever that is, a 3 year, 6 year cycle, they should do the same with their fine arts. Just because it's protected on the inside, because it's not exposed to the outer elements, does not mean that the value of it does not increase. It and can be diminished if it's not kept in good repair. The windows, the pipe organs, if they're not kept in good repair, that can diminish the value. So
Yeah.
they should almost put it on a cycle. If you're looking at your roof every 3 to 6 years, you should be looking at your fine arts
Mhm.
every 3 to 6 years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And especially since a lot of, if you're in that space and you're using these items and your association is with them as a member of this congregation, they're
Yeah.
windows. They're, these pieces that you're using. It's people like us who have the fine art perspective where we're like, oh, actually the price of silver is like tripled since you had that appraised.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that I remember a priest telling me years ago, he'd had a loss to his home, to his church, and there was a lot of damage, not fine art related. It was just the structure. And I walked in on and said to him, do you know how much damage, you guys have and how this has been here for a while and that this needs to be updated? And I remember him saying, I'm a priest, I'm not a businessman.
Yes.
I don't know that. I don't know to ask those questions. I just know
Yeah.
my roof is leaking and it doesn't look good, but
Yeah.
I don't know the questions to ask. So I think brokers and insurance companies, they owe a duty to their insureds to
Mhm.
educate them and to provide them because a lot of cases they're
Mhm.
not businessmen. They're servants for their community and they're
Yeah.
not thinking about all of the maintenance that has to be done, not only to the structure, but also to their precious items. So we have to be advocates. We in the insurance industry or those who work in the art finance industry, we have to be advocates for a lot of churches because they truly don't see themselves as the business and the maintenance and the repair. They see themselves as servants to the community.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how would they know, if
Right,
they're not told? So thank you for
right.
telling them.
Right. I learned that lesson very early on in my career. I said, "Do you know that there's a lot. I'm not a businessman. I don't know I don't know how to call or who to call. I'm a
Mhm.
priest." I said, "I got you. We'll take it from here. We got you. Yeah, you're the
That's great.
insurance company." I said, "You're right. You're right. You're right." And we helped them. I
That's
never
great.
asked that question again.
I'm curious now. I'm thinking now about the windows again,
Okay.
and I mean, I'm sure it's different in every case, but like when somebody's got some nice, attractive windows, stained glass,
Hmm.
um, are things, do makers tend to like leave like, markings on the works, or is this, or does it rely, do you think they're relying on research or like paperwork to try and figure out like who made it and all that kind of stuff? Or I'm just curious about that kind of thing.
Yeah, some, not all. Some don't have any distinguishing marks on their work, and you have to kind of figure it out based on style.
Yeah.
So, Holiday, I don't know if they signed all of their works, but they have a certain style. Tiffany, for me, it's easily recognizable.
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany, I see signatures on most of the works, but not all.
Mm,
And Tiffany got their style from Lafarge. So John Lafarge created that style, the drapery glass and some of those just the opalescent glass and the layered glass to give that sort of ethereal, glowy look.
mhm.
And Tiffany sort of copied that style. And
Okay.
so sometimes when there's no signature, golly, Tiffany can almost resemble
Okay.
Lafarge. And so, but Tiffany has a higher cachet. They demand a higher price point on the
Mhm.
auction market than Lafarge does. So yeah, you have to be somebody who's trained and somebody who has knowledge. Um, it couldn't just be a person walking in off the street and just saying, "Oh yeah," even though there's no signature, this is definitely Tiffany. It may not be. It may be Lafarge. So I've worked with church insurance companies. The current company I work for, I've been with about 10 years. And then prior to that, I worked for another company for 5 years. So for about 15 years of my 30 years in the insurance business, I've worked with insurance companies that insured churches with stained glass windows. So I feel in some way, because I've seen so many different styles of window, I can kind of, I've got a good eye. But
Mhm.
somebody who hasn't been in the industry for that long and hasn't looked at it, I think it would be more difficult.
Mhm.
Most have a signature, but not all. And so you definitely have to look at style and then do your research and then do your
Mm.
research.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for the
Absolutely.
I know for silver, the Tiffany archives are pretty extensive, even though it's quite a process getting access to them. Did they keep that level of documentation for their window commissions, or is that sort of the Wild West?
Yeah, I don't, I haven't come across as much silver and by Tiffany, but absolutely Tiffany does silver. I have seen a signature on the bottom of tea sets. But Tiffany has had a breadth of items that they created. They had the glass studios, but they also they did Lewis Comfort Tiffany, who did the stained glass window, not to be confused with Charles, who did the jewelry, his dad. But Lewis Comfort Tiffany, he started out doing paintings and interior design. And so I don't know that in those early days, of course, his paintings he signed, and of course, most of the stained glass is signed. But some of those other items, he has furniture, he has light fixtures like sconces and hanging lights. I don't know that all of them have a signature in addition to silver. But we have some churches that were completely designed because he was relevant during that time, and so they utilized all of his resources. We have some churches that are completely designed from the
Wow.
hanging lights, the windows, and even the scrolling design, the mosaics on the wall, all done by Louis Comfort Tiffany, his studios. And so not all of them have a signature. You have to kind of do the research and find out and look and find out, okay, this is attributed to Tiffany, not signed by him, but or the church will have the records. Sometimes the church will have those original contracts and from 1889, 1890, yeah.
Mhm.
And or they'll have a historian at the church who still knows all of the information. Hard part is that because that artwork goes all the way back over 100 years, many of the people who are in the church now obviously weren't around and they stopped keeping records or they lost track of those records. So you really need somebody who has an appraisal background with some knowledge of it to do the research for you and to dig a little deeper. Not a signature, sure looks like it. Let me do a little bit more research for you and see. And in a lot of cases, what they thought was attributed to Tiffany is not. And in some cases, it is. But usually when it's a whole building design, a whole interior sanctuary designed by Tiffany, there are copious records. They may be missing or scattered or lost, but there are records out there. And,
Yeah.
and we can, yeah.
Yeah, and this is reminding me of there's some rooms in the Metropolitan Museum of Art that kind of have paintings and sconces and designs
Mhm.
by Tiffany in that complete Gesamtwerk as they say. And so for people who can't visit one of those churches you're talking about, the
Yeah.
Met is a good place to start to get a sense of what it felt like being in that total environment.
And definitely, absolutely. And definitely, yes, we know that the stained glass windows have significant value, but please don't underestimate the value of those sconces and those hanging lights
Mm.
that are in your churches. I went into a church, I want to say it was in Philadelphia, a couple of years ago to do a fine arts risk assessment. And we were looking at the beautiful windows and doing my measuring and photographing and gathering my data. And the organist just happened to know that the sconces on the wall that had been taken down and put sort of like in a burlap type sack that they were getting ready to bring them to Goodwill. And I
Mm.
said, he said, these are some Tiffany sconces, but I mean, we're just going to bring them to Goodwill. And I said, wait, what?
Back up here.
And I peeked in and I was like, oh my gosh. I said, do you know that right now that these sconces are selling for six figures on the open market?
Oh my
And I
God.
said, "Hey, I'm imploring you to bring them to auction, collect the value for them, and then if you want to donate the value to
Right. Yes.
your favorite charity or whatever you need to do, but please don't just give them away to a Goodwill because they may not know the value and then they may be sold for pennies on the dollar. So you know, don't underestimate that just because it's not a Tiffany stained glass window, that if it's a Tiffany hanging light or a mosaic or a sconce, that it doesn't have value. They have significant value. And they're still, right now, the market is still bearing with their, there are people out there who will pay top dollar for them.
Everybody watching this is going to run over to their Goodwill right now.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Or
Yeah.
next week at Christmas service, just take a look around a little bit.
Yeah. Take a look at your environment. Yeah,
Yes.
what you're
Yeah.
looking at. If you've got Tiffany stained glass windows, there's a possibility that those sconces or the hanging lights in that sanctuary may also be by Tiffany. Yeah, check
That's
into
amazing.
that for sure.
And I'm thinking this is perhaps something that'd be useful for someone either who, works at a church or is kind of the archivist role at a church to just review the documentation that
Yeah.
exists. Are there receipts from the turn of
Yeah.
the century? Or,
Yeah.
sometimes that stuff gets stuffed in a vault and nobody pulls it out for decades. So
Mhm.
that for anybody watching this who's like, oh goodness, should we do something? Like just
Yeah.
starting with looking at your documentation and seeing, is there anything that's like, whoa, this is important? Because that's also going to save an appraiser so much time later.
Yeah.
Yes, when we come out to do an assessment, the first thing we ask is for the provenance. Is there any information? I mean, I see the signature, I got it, I know it's, but there have been some copycats out there. But for the most part, we're gonna assume that this is Tiffany. But do you have any documentation? Is there any records anywhere in the archives, somewhere buried deep? I've been in some churches, definitely in Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia a lot last year for work, and some of those older churches from even the 17, 1800s, they had an archive and they had original signatures from the early 1800s, the late 1700s. So there's a good chance Tiffany was around the late 1800s, early 1900s. if they keep records from the late 1700s and 1800s, there got to be churches out there that keep records from the late 1800s and early 1900s. You just have to ask. That's the
Yeah.
best place to start. Do you have any documentation? And sometimes there was an appraisal done. It may have been done in 1978 or 1992, but if there's an
Mhm.
appraisal out there, a lot of times it's full of the information like when the windows were created. Sometimes just looking at the window, you don't know if it was from the 1880s or the 1890s. Um, and so that documentation helps you to understand the age of the window. Also with the windows, some are more popular, some styles are more popular than others on the art market right now. And obviously the florals and the landscapes, because that's very general. Those are
Mhm.
much more popular on the market um, than what would be maybe the ones of Christ or the Christian family, because that's more specific. Angels are somewhere in the middle of landscapes and religious deities, but it kind of goes in that order of popularity.
Okay.
Landscapes and florals, very, very popular. Angels next, and then religious figures after that.
Great. One thing I was wondering well, I guess that really any with stained glass, really any Tiffany or any level of maker, I was wondering if it's such a thing. Like, do you see like I don't know what to call it, standardization, or like, do you see like repeat? Are they all custom made and unique, or I'm wondering if there's such a thing as standard sizes or something like that.
Hmm.
I don't, yeah, if that's the right.
Um,
I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
I think uh, I've seen Tiffany mostly in Christian churches,
Okay.
and a lot of those early churches with that long aisle and then maybe the two side aisles, the windows were, sort of a certain size depending upon the type of church. But I don't think that was a written rule, because I've seen Tiffany that's in churches that might have a dome, they may have been the small windows sort of in that top of that dome. I've definitely seen them on the side walls. And then sometimes they'll have a Tiffany window that is like the signature piece. It's like maybe at the very back or the very front of the church, and it's a
Oh, sure.
huge signature piece. And it takes up a large portion of that wall.
Yeah.
So I've not seen like a specific signature size, although
Okay.
most church windows kind of had, in those early days, sort of had that sort of narrow rectangular
Hmm.
size. And I've never seen a particular Tiffany window that was duplicated somewhere else, unless it was in one church and it was like an abstract style and they duplicated that abstract style
Sure.
throughout
Okay.
the church. But as far as the design, the floral or the secular image or the angels, they all have some unique quality to them. I've never seen,
Hmm.
if I'm in St. Mary's Church and then I go to St. John's Church, the windows are not the same. They may have
They're not like
similar.
reproduced and then,
Uh-uh.
yeah.
I've
Okay.
never seen that. I've never seen the mass production unless it was again inside of that one church and it was like a pattern,
Yeah. Okay.
within that one church.
That's really interesting.
Mhm. And that pattern would be unique, from my experience, has been unique just to that church. I may not see that same pattern, even if I go to another church and they've got a number of windows that are just sort of abstract and have a specific, that pattern was unique to that church.
Hmm.
It wasn't just like St. Mary's. St. Mary's and St. John's abstracts are completely different.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
That's
That's interesting. Um, one thing I see from time to time is, I don't know if this is the right word, like deconsecrated type, like places that are now that were churches or synagogues and are now for sale as like domestic. You know what I mean? I don't
Hmm.
know. And I mean, I've definitely seen some stained glass in that. So I wonder how frequently that could go under the radar. You know what I mean? And suddenly now it's in someone's home or something like that. I mean, that would be, obviously. I don't think it's the kind of churches with giant productions, but maybe a
Right.
place with, yeah. I don't know.
I was in one church in Brooklyn a couple years ago, and the church had not been in service for a number of years. They'd had a roof, some roof damage, and the roof damage had caused a lot of water damage inside of the church. So the church
Mm,
wasn't habitable. It was,
okay.
they needed a lot of repairs done. Well, when I go into the church, they sent me there because they thought there might be Tiffany in there. And I mean, this church was
Wow.
dark inside and it was wet and it was, it was not in good repair.
The
No, like,
thing the appraisers have to go to.
yeah, right. No electricity, cold. It was New York. It was the winter. And I put my flashlight up and every window, I was like, oh my God. They were Tiffany windows. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my God. And I knew at that point the windows in there the windows probably could have helped to repair the church had they
Yeah.
had those removed. So I do see that. I have seen that from time to time where the church doesn't realize maybe the church was from a certain denomination maybe years ago and then another church bought it when the neighborhood changed and now the new members of this church or this new church affiliation they don't realize that these windows that are in their church
Mhm.
are of significant value. um, and so I definitely have seen that,
Mm,
but I haven't seen where a church just gave away, and I'm sure it
right.
happened. I'm sure it has probably happened, but just in my experience, I haven't seen where a church just gave away Tiffany windows and somebody now just has it in their, in their house somewhere. But I'm not saying it hasn't happened, it just hasn't been in my
Yeah,
experience.
yeah, to Goodwill. Yeah.
Yes.
No,
Right.
because
Yes.
I mean, I'm a
But you
designer.
hear stories about that all the time, where somebody comes across $1 million painting or you
Mhm.
know, and they thought it was in Goodwill. Yeah.
I love Patrick's question because I'm like such a design geek. So I'm always watching those home tours of the people who have, this really unique architectural, home that they've turned into a private residence and it used to be something else. And so I'm
Yeah.
sure out there's probably somebody who's in a deconsecrated church that has very cool things in the built
Yeah.
fabric, and they should call you.
Call me. I'll be happy to do the research for you. And a lot of churches, the church uh, staff, they don't have time for that. They're serving their community. They're helping others. They're not focused on, I wonder if this is $1 million piece of artwork, or I wonder if these serving utensils are actually made of gold or made of silver, or genuine silver or gold, or any number of questions, or are these oil paintings on the wall, do they have any value? They don't have time for that, but that's what I do. And
Great.
it's not work for me. Like when you have a passion for something, it doesn't feel like work. So I'm happy to do
Mhm.
that. I'm happy to do the research for you.
That's great. Well, how do people get in touch with you, Lisa? How would
Yeah.
they, just to get the ball rolling or ask some questions?
Yeah, definitely. You always hate saying this, I'm getting my website updated, and I actually am, and it will be, if we ever do a follow-up, it's like ready next week. But I have changed the name of my company to reflect how I'm
Okay,
broadening the scope of what I do. So
great.
Leiza McKenna appraisals will now be Chase Art Advisory and Valuation starting in the new year, starting in January of 2026. So the web page is in production and it'll be ready. And Chase is a family name, so I'm using that name to reflect my family, and then art advising and valuation for what I do for the public. But they can reach me right now. They can reach me at my email address, which is leizamckenna@gmail.com, and that will not change. So Leizamckenna @gmail. The
Awesome.
best way
Excellent.
to reach me.
Congratulations on the rebrand, and we'll get all that in the show notes once it
Okay.
so people will be able to just click. It'll be very easy for them to call and hire.
Yeah. Yeah. Though the new website will be www.chaseartadvisory.com. So I'll email you guys all of that. But yeah, it's like minutes away from being done. You're doing the edits and checking. And I wanted to make it more reflective of how my business is expanding.
That's
I'm
great.
consulting, I'm brokering, and I'm appraising. I'm on retainer right now with an art gallery. They just opened up a small Black art gallery, and the owner says, I'm a businessman, but I don't even know anything about art. So I got you.
Nice.
So I'm helping him. And then I've been helping clients bring their art to auction or helping them find buyers for the art. So I've become, a broker of sorts. So I said, I want my name to now reflect, my business name to reflect all that I'm doing and that I can provide, not just
Cool.
to individuals, but to galleries, museums. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Congratulations on that. Yeah. Very
thank you.
exciting.
Thank you. So yeah,
Very
to be
exciting.
continued.
To be continued. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think this is great. What we did here today, I think it'll be, it could even turn into like one longer thing. You know what I mean? Because it was
Sure.
like so comprehensive.
Oh, we could go deeper. I mean,
Deeper.
we
Okay.
could go into different denominations and their valuations of the different types of items, like in the synagogue. The Greek
Okay.
Orthodox Church is a whole discussion in and of itself. The murals
Very
and
cool.
everything that goes into the murals, the gold leaf and I mean, it's a whole thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, we could
Do you
definitely.
ever do you ever like travel abroad for stuff, or is it pretty
You
much
know,
all?
I have been real hesitant to, but I've been told that I must in
Okay.
order to broaden it. You're going to have to. My brother lives in Paris. He's like, America, America has nothing on European
Oh wow.
fine art and architecture and stained glass. You've got to come to Europe and I said, yeah, yeah, I know, I do. So
Well,
yeah, so
yeah,
that
you should go sometime. I'll meet you there because I have family in Paris as
do
well.
you?
Yeah, so
Yeah, my brother.
we could all
Yeah.
have a little coffee, one of those teeny coffees or something.
My brother lives in Paris, so definitely. So when I finally get the time and the nerve to take 10 days out of my schedule to go away, yeah, Patrick, I'll be in contact with you. It'd be so fun.
That'd
Yeah.
be great.
And my little brother has been living there. He just moved there after he turned 50.
Oh
Today's
wow.
his birthday.
Oh wow.
So he's 53 today. So he's been there for 3 years, but he's been going back and forth since he was 18.
Wow.
Remember when we used to have back in the day, we call them the st exchange students? They
Hmm.
used to come to your, I'm dating myself. We used to have exchange students in our high schools. They'd come from another country and be with us for a year. Well, my little brother, they had an exchange student at his high school. He became the best of friends with. He was from France. So
That's
when he
great.
graduated from high school, he went to visit him for a week and learned all about it, majored in French in college and international relations, lived there for a year and taught, and he became a Francophile. And
That's
when he
great.
turned 50 3 years ago, he was like, I'm going to become a dual citizen. And that's what he is.
Nice.
Wow.
He's a,
That's so
yeah,
funny. That's like almost exactly what happened to my brother-in-law. Except he did a semester abroad, like when he was in college, right? So he
yeah,
went there, but
yeah.
then he didn't want to come back.
Uh-huh.
And his dad, my father-in-law, had to go and like literally drag him. Well, it was because he met a French woman. So
Okay.
that's why
Okay.
he wouldn't come back. So
Yeah.
my father-in-law had to go and literally drag him back to go
Yeah.
finish last semester of college and then he went back and has never ever
Is
come back.
never to return. My
Two
little
kids.
brother,
Yeah.
while he was at Minnesota, he went to Minnesota. While he was there, he did a junior year. He did his junior year abroad. So he did 9 months. So that sealed it from
Wow.
going for a high school trip after he graduated and then doing his whole junior year in Paris. He said, when I
Hmm.
came back, I couldn't speak, I was dreaming in French. Like in nine
Hmm.
months, I became
Wow.
fluent and he's never lost it. So yeah, so
Very cool.
definitely I will go abroad. I will stay in touch.
Yeah. Well, you got the place to go. So the
All
early,
right. Oh
the
yeah.
place to
For
free,
sure.
hopefully a free place to stay, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, but seriously, if you guys want to talk in the future more about the insurance world and fine art, I mean, there are so many areas and levels and layers that we could talk about. To
Love
educate
to.
your
Absolutely.
your guys. Yeah, for sure. And just even and we were talking more on the commercial side today, but just talking about the on the homeowner side,
Oh
so
yeah.
many of my clients, just as appraising African American art, African contemporary, for my African American clients, so many of them have huge collections and did not have them properly insured or insured at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
so while I'm doing the appraisal, I'm like, why are we appraising this? Well, my insurance company's on us, but I don't
Yeah.
understand why. And then I'd have to explain to them, you only have $2,500 worth of coverage. I'm appraising $250,000 worth of art right now. I mean,
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
God forbid. So it's become an educate me having the insurance background, I believe has helped a lot of my clients in the appraisal on the appraisal side. So we could definitely talk about on the
Definitely.
homeowner side, um,
Mhm.
how I don't want to say uneducated, that sounds negative, how how many of my clients just don't have the knowledge that
There's
they're
so much
not fully
opportunity, right?
that they're
Yeah.
fully covered. Yeah,
Right.
even for the jewelry. I mean, their agent makes sure that they get their wedding rings covered, but but nothing else.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh, a treasure trove in many of my, I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
lack of understanding about how insurance works is, it harms the people who have the items, and there's like so much business that's lost for appraisers.
Hmm.
It's very complex and none of the names make sense, like inland marine
Mm-mm.
policy. But
Mm-mm.
this is something Patrick and I talk about a lot, that if people just had better understanding of how it worked and what they
Yes.
need, like
Yes.
Yeah.
it would be a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
Or just, yeah, just the simple fact that, an appraisal or the value of an item is only the value at a specific time.
That's
And
right.
that's is always changing.
That's
The
right.
time factor is the,
Yeah.
you know,
That's right. Whereas, in the insurance industry, tables and chairs and TVs diminish in value. And so when there's a loss, we only pay at actual cash value for the tables and
mm,
chairs and the desks because they depreciate in value.
yeah,
But the artwork appreciates in value. So that's why the insurance company wants the art on a separate scale, because when you're evaluating on a loss, you're putting the depreciated value until they replace them.
yeah,
And then you get the replacement cost value if you choose to replace the desks and the TVs and the chairs. The artwork, you can pay them out at actual cash value, but with a rider, you'll get that market value that you insured it for. And
I
that's why
agree.
it has to be updated every 3 to 5 years to reflect
Yeah,
the increase in value that naturally happens with most artwork. Yeah.
yeah.